Hello, this is Siegfried Trent. Welcome to my video series, What Do I Think About? Today's topic is, what do I think about the implicit bias in AI training? And this question comes from my friend Charlie Cooper, so thank you very much, my friend, for this topic. So I can't say that I'm an all-out expert in artificial intelligence. It's certainly a topic I'm interested in, but I'm not an expert in it. I am a software engineer, and I did that job for about 24 years, but I never worked in AI. I was a database specialist for the most part. So I had to go and research this topic a little bit to even find out exactly what it was. So let me explain a little bit what this topic is about. So modern AI systems are learning machines, and they're generally created to do a specific kind of a task and do it better, faster, cheaper than people can do it. A good example is a chess playing program. So, these days we can create a chess playing program. Humans don't really teach it how to play chess. What they do is they create a learning system where the AI can learn to play chess by observing games and having experience playing games. And then slowly over time it develops kind of an algorithm, its own internal system. We don't even understand exactly what it's doing or why it's doing it, and it learns to play chess. And the more games it plays, the better it gets. And so these kinds of chess systems have beat the best human players in the world. Not by being taught by humans how to play, but being taught by humans how to learn. And then they play millions of games and they get better and better at it. So these are kind of learning AI systems. Now, in order to teach a learning AI system, it needs lots of examples of data in order to learn from. So if you wanted to spot owls in the woods or something, it's going to need a lot of pictures of woods and owls, and it's going to need to try and figure out what the owls are, and then over time you kind of grade it. You go, yeah, no, that's not an owl. There's an owl. Okay. So, millions of images of woods and owls and stuff, and eventually it gets better and better at spotting them, right? But there's kind of a limitation in that it can only learn from the information that you put in. And this is where the idea of an implicit bias comes in. So if there is some kind of a bias in the data that you feed into the AI, then the AI is going to have a bias in its decision making. It's not really going to be doing its job in the way you want it to. So let's give a very good example that's often used in literature when discussing this problem. Let's say we're a big Fortune 500 company. Our job is to hire lots of employees. We've got always positions to fill. We know that the broadest scan of candidates possible, we want to get the most possible candidates and get the very cream of the crop out of those people into our jobs. We want the best people working for us that we can possibly find at the best prices. So the wider we cast the net, the more resumes we look at, the more people that we can invite to apply for our jobs, the better, right? But human resources is going to get buried under a gazillion resumes. You've all heard the stories where you have a giant stack of resumes. They just have some weird arbitrary criteria like, oh, I don't like the font, and they throw out half of them. There's a word missing, they throw out the other half. Is this scientific and the best way to sift through these? Probably not. But an AI system that can read these resumes in a flash, analyze them, scan for keywords, do analysis on them, and also use artificial intelligence to try and figure out who the best candidates are, can reduce millions of resumes down to maybe 12 incredibly competent, really promising candidates. That sounds awesome. It's going to give a company a big, huge edge in hiring. It's going to save tons of time and manpower and resources in the human resources department. It's a big win-win-win-win, right? So here's the problem. How do you train this AI system? Well, you can feed it tons and tons of resumes of people that you know, and you can feed their history of the company. How have they success? What was their success rate? How were they hired in? How did they do on performance tests within the company? This kind of thing. So you can take your own internal data and feed it into one of these systems. You can even take company from your sister companies, your parent companies, from other companies you buy data from data warehousers and stuff like that. Get all this stuff in there, cram it in, analyze the heck out of it, create a really smart AI that can do this job. But here's the problem. One of the things that we want to avoid in this AI system is, frankly, making a racist AI system. We don't want it to discriminate against women. We don't want it to discriminate against black people. We don't want to discriminate against whatever, right? Any of these protected groups within the federal hiring laws. And if we make an AI system that is going to be built in to be racist and sexist, that's a huge problem and a huge liability, right? It's not just something we don't want. The government could come after us for this. So how do we make a system? Because if we already had racial biases in our company or sex biases, let's say women tended not to get promoted, right, for one reason or another, maybe intrinsic reasons, maybe just sexism. And that was a pattern, and women didn't do well in a company. If you train the AI on your existing company employees, it's going to say, women aren't such a good pick. They don't advance so far up the company ladder. They don't get as many promotions. They don't get chosen as often to be hired for jobs. So even if you tell the computer, no, look, just ignore man or woman on the sheet, it's going to pick up other subtle clues and work patterns and history patterns and language use, things like that are going to be sex related. And this implicit bias is going to become part of the AI system. And eventually, you're hard coding the habits that your humans already have into an AI system. And that might not be what you want. That's not one of the reasons that you're going to put that thing in there. Maybe it's going to pick on those arbitrary things where you just skimmed out the resumes based on fonts or something else. And it's going to pick up on that pattern. And it's just going to keep doing what you kind of wanted to avoid by having this smarter, better system. So that's kind of what implicit AI bias is all about. And it can come in many different scenarios in many different ways. The owl pictures, maybe only show it the one kind of owl, and then it becomes just sort of focused on picking out horny owls, and it doesn't know how to do great owls or barn owls or stuff like that. So you have to be very careful in the kind of the data that you feed these things. What else can we say about that? There are some cases that are kind of immune to implicit bias, so like chess, for example, because it's just going to play chess, right? And chess doesn't really have any biases. Now, if you only had it look at the way human beings played games, it might be a little bit limited, right? If it could only make moves that humans had moved. But the computer can simulate chess, and it can do its own games and play from scratch. And many of them don't look at any human games in order to be trained because they didn't want these implicit biases, something they wanted to throw out. They wanted to be better than human. Well, chess is an example where we can do that because we can completely simulate the game inside of kind of a virtual environment, right? You can't really do that with hiring or with office promotions or some of these more complicated real-life scenarios, economics, stock investments, and business decisions. We can make like a game that the computer can play that's a abstracted simulation, but then it's going to learn how to play the game. It's not going to learn how to do the real thing. So there are problems, and there's a kind of a bias there with that kind of simulation. Whatever the rules of the simulation are, that's really what the AI is going to hone on. And so then you get a different kind of a bias introduced in its learning process. So this is kind of difficult. Human beings need to be incredibly good teachers for our AI systems. Maybe we develop AI that teaches other AI. I'm sure that somebody's working on things like that. So what can we do to reduce these implicit bias systems? Well, here's a few ideas I have. Again, I'm not an expert. Maybe some of these things are already done, but here's what I'm thinking. Number one, we need to recognize when implicit bias is likely to happen. We need to kind of understand the problem and be able to look at the data set that we're going to introduce to the computer and have some good sense as to whether or not it create a biased outcome, and then think about what we could do to try and countermand that. We can try to use simulations whenever possible. Anytime we can get the computer to abstract a situation and run it in a virtual environment, not only can it learn faster, but you're going to remove some of the biases of the real-world examples that you might feed it. We need to work on ways for AIs to report on their strategies. So like I said, a lot of these computer systems, they can play chess and Go, but they can't explain to us how they're doing it, right? Like they can't articulate these strategies in language that we can understand particularly. We can go and sift through the code, but the way these systems work, it's giant piles of data and it's very abstracted. So one thing we can do is we can work on a way for AI systems to kind of essentially be able to describe to us what it is they're doing and the conclusions and strategies that they reached. I think that's a pretty difficult level of abstraction, or de-abstraction as the case may be. But I think it's something that will become really important for AI in the future, especially if we have AI, we want to understand what it's doing. We want to understand if it has biases. We need a way to kind of reverse engineer the language that the computer understands into something that we humans can comprehend, or at least at a general level. Finally, we need to allow people to override specific decisions that AI makes, or set a set of goals that are maybe contrary to its primary set of goals. So we can say to the computer, like, whatever it is you're doing, we need certain kind of generalized ratios of diversity within our workforce. It's an extra goal that we have in addition to the promotion and that sort of thing. And so the AI system can kind of work on that goal as well and say, what do we need to do in order to create a diversified workforce? How do we find the people who are minorities, women who are going to succeed within these environments specifically, so that they can stick into those jobs and find out why people are leaving these jobs, what traits and characteristics are causing flight or are causing the narrowing of field or a lack of diversity in a particular field or area of interest, right? So that kind of thing, or in any other area as well. Or for instance, like Facebook algorithms. Boy, would I like to be able to tell Facebook, I already bought one of those. Like, the reason it's in my email is I bought it, I've enjoyed it, I'm not going to buy it again, there's no point. Please stop showing me ads for the thing. When I worked at GABA in Japan, I constantly saw ads that maybe I would like to take classes at GABA. Now, I teach classes at GABA. I don't think I need to take classes there. So it'd be nice for us as humans to be able to tell the AI, look, yeah, we understand how you got this impression, but it's wrong. And to be able to just correct it directly and have the AI understand that, okay, well, that conclusion, whatever it is, I should just throw it out, no matter how I reached it. So I think these 4 steps would kind of be some ways that we can reduce the problem of implicit bias within AI. I'm not sure that we can ever completely eliminate it, because these computers are learning from the world around us. They're learning from human behavior. Human behavior has biases. All right, well, that's it for this topic. Thanks very much. If you enjoy it, please follow our channel. You can click the subscribe button if you would like to get notification when new videos are available, about once a week. And if you want to check out other things I'm doing, you can go to sigtrent.com, or you can go to Sigtrent Plays Games on Twitch and on Facebook, and you can watch me play video games. All right, that's it for today. Thanks very much. If you have any suggestions for topics you'd like to see, questions you'd like me to address, please put them in the comments below, and I'll probably do them. All right, bye-bye.